quite the same, personality, but most of us, we meet somebody in school or grad school and move off to where, ever the jobs are or the postgraduate education is. And then we get a job there. And pretty
Yeah.
soon we're 1,000 miles away from our nuclear family. And we don't have that kind of support.
Welcome to Take Back My Brain with Laurie Hammer, where real healing starts in the brain. I'm Laurie, a functional nutritionist and mom who's walked the path from anxiety and burnout to clarity and calm. Each week, we're going to dive into brain-based tools like amino acid therapy, gut health, fasting, and faith to help you reclaim your energy, emotions, and sense of self. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Laurie Hammer, and I'm so excited you're here today. We are going to dive into health span with Dr. Pat McShane. And Dr. Pat is an amazing physician, a reproductive physician, where she worked with as a fertility specialist for over 40 years, which is super exciting. And now she is diving into women's health in the latter stages of our lives. And because there's not a lot of great information out there, or there's a lot of social construct or misinformation giving out there. So I'm really excited to dive into this today. And I know that you know someone who needs this. So make sure you like, subscribe, and share to that person if it's not you. Okay. So Pat, thank you for being on today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you spent 40 years as a fertility specialist. I would love to know what that's like to start with, because babies are amazing, but
Yes,
it's
they
so
are.
hard to have
Yeah,
them sometimes.
yeah, yep. It affects so many people. The difficulty having children affects so many people, not just in the, more well-developed countries, but all over the world, truly. And
Yeah.
it's such a profound inner need of most women and couples to pass on their genes and to have so being able to help people was tremendously, just fulfilling. And when I first started, I was in an academic medical center, and I guess I would say that kind of the easy situations had been taken care of by the community gynecologists, and we weren't having a lot of good luck with the patients who came to the academic medical center. This was at
Mm.
the Brigham and Women's in Boston. And this was pre-IVF, in vitro fertilization.
Oh,
And,
okay.
if people had severe male factor, we would say, well, use donor sperm or, good luck, maybe you'll get pregnant. If they had really bad tubes or, pelvic problems that had been operated on and various other therapies, but just wasn't giving them a pregnancy that they wanted, we would kind of throw up our hands and say, well, good luck.
Right.
And then again, if people were approaching 40 or had gone through menopause, lost their ovarian function earlier than that, we had nothing to offer. And then
Right.
in vitro came along and gradually gave us options, not solutions necessarily, but options for each of those situations. And then unexplained infertility is huge too. When we first started doing in vitro fertilization, we were doing laparoscopy, which is looking, surgically into the belly button and grabbing the ovaries and putting a needle in under general anesthesia for each egg that we had been
Yeah.
preparing over a couple of weeks. And that was a pretty big deal to do a laparoscopy. And we didn't have any special sauce for the sperm. We just would throw some sperm in there and keep our fingers crossed. And we didn't know which embryos were the best ones. So we'd put in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And, you can imagine what all the problems with that situation were.
Right.
Maybe you didn't get fertilization. Maybe you got too many good embryos, and then you'd have triplets. So, finally over time, the whole process got much more efficient. We were able to determine the health of the embryos to a greater extent and put back one embryo for most women under most conditions. And if the woman's own eggs weren't functioning very well, we could offer eggs from another woman, and prepare the woman who wanted to be pregnant, prepare her uterus hormonally. And that works really, really well. Or if somebody had a unfortunate uterine situation, fibroids or a hysterectomy, but her ovaries were okay, we could put their embryos into somebody else's uterus. And so all of this just evolved over the 20, 30 years that I was doing it, and it became much, much more successful, less invasive, less intrusive, more options. And it was wonderful. I feel extremely privileged to have been part of that whole era.
Yeah. That's amazing what science has
Yeah.
done to help the body in those
And it's
situations.
not for everyone.
Yeah.
It's not what people would choose, obviously,
No,
most people
obviously not.
for themselves. But, again, a great option for a lot of people.
Yeah. Did you ever have any, like, ethical dilemmas or anything with that? Like, was there a hard piece to any of that, working with fertility?
Oh, yes, quite. People with profound disabilities who might not be able to get pregnant without a lot of intervention. And then, the concern for the fetus, basically for the
Sure.
child, would always come up. And utilizing family members for, for eggs or sperm, or
Mhm.
if the couple's own eggs and sperm weren't okay,
Yeah.
using somebody else's uterus, to carry the child, who was a family member or who had some of their own issues. Yeah, we had regular ethical discussions and counselors on staff.
Oh my goodness, I would imagine.
Yeah, and most people came through the front door with already a pretty big history
Sure.
of gynecologic problems, you know, feeling of failure, couple issues, or one person would want to go in this direction, the other person
Mhm.
wasn't okay with it. So you'd have the man, the woman, and the offspring, the child, and then maybe the gestational carrier or the egg donor, lots
Oh, wow. Very
of,
complicated.
yeah. So those were the more challenging situations.
No kidding. Yeah. Well, you went from that into dealing with women who aren't fertile anymore, past that age of fertility, and, really helping them increase their health span. I love the fact that you call it health span instead of lifespan.
Yeah,
And I would love for you to define that for us and then just kind of take us into, like, what is your vision in helping women in this stage of life?
sure, sure. Lifespan until we hit COVID basically had been slowly extending, and lifespan is how long we live. And the
Mhm.
average woman in North America and in the developed world is in her 80s
Right.
at the time of her demise. And that has slowly gone up over centuries. Really, the last century was the big one. And people don't die of heart attacks so much anymore. Women,
Mhm.
get heart attacks as much as men at a certain age,
Yeah.
but they may be living with disability from the conditions that we all kind of acquire, or many of us, most of us acquire over time, and that includes diabetes type 2, the older onset
Mhm.
type, blood pressure problems, coronary artery disease, heart arrhythmias, congestive heart problems, the heart getting too big and not squeezing very efficiently, the list goes on and on, arthritis, various hormonal, thyroid and other conditions. So this somebody may be walking around, but they may be pretty poorly functional. They may
Right,
need
right.
major mobility issues, major issues of energy, unable to do the basic things that they would like to be able to do on their own. So
Yeah,
for most of us, there's about a 10-year gap between what we're defining as health span, in other words, feeling pretty healthy and able to do
yeah.
things for yourself versus lifespan, how long you
Oh,
actually live.
wow.
And that's what that the extension of lifespan has been at the expense of health span.
Sure.
It used to be that people would get to their grave, still walking around, but then their heart attack would kill them or whatever. But this doesn't. Now we have other options that we can do for people with renal failure, diabetes, blood pressure problems, but their quality of life may be quite limited.
Sure. Hey, friend, just a quick break to remind you if calming your brain is the missing piece in your practice or in your home, my Mind Thrive certification course teaches you exactly how to do that with targeted amino acid therapy. So it's real science, real results, no band aids. Enrollment is now open. Link is in the show notes. So back to the show. That makes sense. So what is your goal, like, to bust some of the social constraints, the constructs, like this around ageism? Like, what does that look like?
It's pretty big.
It is
Um,
big. That's what I'm asking.
what I found when I was, in my 60s and 70s myself was that there was information out there if you were pretty sophisticated and looking in certain places for the information, but there was also a deluge of other information, dietary stuff. Every week it would be blueberries are good,
Right.
oatmeal's good, oatmeal's bad, blueberries not so good, dairy, on and on and on. The best diet is this one or that one, keto or fasting or cold water plunges, hot, et
Right.
cetera, et cetera. So I'm like, there must be a better way to get this information out there. And there are a few big studies that are basically generating a lot of excellent data. The main one being the UK Biobank, the United Kingdom
Mm,
Biobank. And they studied 500,000 people over a number of years with some pretty not sophisticated, super, because otherwise people wouldn't join up with the study, but, people who were willing to be followed fairly intensively at certain points and then continue to be followed up. And that has generated a tremendous amount of information. Who knew that taking the shingles vaccine would protect you from dementia? That's one example. Maybe I chose the most polarizing discussion we have now as on vaccines.
we won't go there.
That's,
That's fine.
we won't go there. Thank you.
We won't go there. That's fine.
But that, that's one of the things that they found. And
Mhm.
that kind of information has led us to different hypotheses about what is dementia.
Mhm.
That's just one example. A lot about exercise, a lot about alcohol intake, a lot about diet, obesity, things that we have some control or at least input
Right.
into. And that just appealed to me to a great extent that to get this information out there. So I started my own podcast, my own YouTube site. So that's kind of the background. A lot of people get pretty, I don't like to use the word gaslighted. That's such a profound idea, but and
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily blaming the practitioners because there hasn't been a lot of information about the
Mhm.
menopause transition and the physiology of a 60, 70, 80-year-old woman compared to a 20 or 30-year-old woman or a
Right.
60 or 80-year-old man. There's still needs to be a lot more done to remedy that situation. But whatever the cause may be, people are kind of ignored or told, "Oh, you're just getting older. Of course, you're creaky and you're
Mhm.
achy and your bones are, you know, and that's, there's more to it than that. A lot of what are common complaints, which is a medical word that I don't like, but a person telling you about their symptoms, we're not necessarily complaining, but we're telling
Right.
somebody what we feel weak or, achy when we get up in the morning. These are not necessarily normal for your age, but in fact reflect something that's either going on or something that you can do something about. So overcoming that kind of lack of information and just ageism, we're not,
Mhm.
valued to the same degree as a 50-year-old guy who's running a company.
Right.
So let's be clear about that. This is not confined to medical care. It's kind of our whole culture.
Across
So,
the board. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what are some things that you are really trying to get the word out and teaching on?
Well, I think activity, movement is kind of the secret sauce for healthy aging. And that has been shown on for so many different conditions to be as effective, let's say for depression, for example, which is a big, big problem
Very
in
big.
all age ranges, but certainly for older women.
Mhm.
That activity, movement, at what exercise again? You, terminology matters here. Just being active, being physically active, is as effective for some kinds of depression as an antidepressant is,
Mhm.
and less side effects for the most
A
part.
lot less side effects.
Yeah, yeah. Mostly, although you can injure yourself, so you have to be a little bit careful. So that's one message that I would like to get across. I've done podcasts on eye health. That's a big one. We kind of just show up at the ophthalmology office every year and we don't really
Mhm.
know exactly what they're telling us, but that's one. Bone health is a big one because falls and hip fractures are so scary for women. The downstream implications of having a fall and a hip fracture are huge. The list just goes on and on. Cardiovascular disease, dietary choices, obviously, is
Yeah.
huge. Sleep is a big one. I'm sure most of us wouldn't bother to tell our doc or our practitioner that we're sleeping poorly necessarily because we have five other things that we want to talk about. But that
Right.
underlies so much of good health as well. Social stuff. I just did a podcast on the loneliness epidemic,
Mm.
and loneliness and social isolation are just as risky for what we call all-cause mortality, or the chance of dying basically over a certain time frame. Loneliness and social isolation are as risky as high blood pressure or high
Mhm.
cholesterol or cardiovascular disease. So these are the kinds of things that I think people could hear about and grab onto and make a positive change in their life, perhaps,
Yeah.
or at
I'm so
least feel understood.
Yeah, understood is huge. How old are you?
76.
76. Because you said when you were in your 60s and 70s a little while back. I'm like, you are not over 80.
Not yet.
Can't be.
I'm hoping, yeah,
Those of
right.
you listening, you can't see her. She looks phenomenal. Just so you know.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes. So when you retired from being a fertility specialist and all those things, and going into retirement, like how did this all start clicking for you? Like what changes did you and your family make so that you made the decision to age differently?
Yes, yes. I mean, the the medical training is so intense, and then the practice of medicine is so intense.
Yeah.
It's kind of, takes a little while to come down from that. And in fact, I didn't come down from it completely. I was still working, 1
Okay.
or 2 days a week for quite a while after my, kind of formal retirement. But
Okay.
and then this idea about what can I do to get these messages to people. I guess you get asked a lot of questions at cocktail parties and by your siblings. In my case, I
Uh-huh.
have three sisters. So, it kind of is a natural space that you feel like you're an educator. And I think much of medical intervention and interaction is really educational, and you can,
Yeah.
I'm sure, understand that and agree with that. When I would see somebody walk in the door, in 5 or 10 minutes, I would have a mental picture of what they needed. But then you would spend the rest of the hour trying to figure out, well, where are they? What are their values? What's their understanding? What can they accept or work with? What
Yeah.
risks are they willing to undertake? And that's true for this as well. This is education and getting people to understand things that might make a difference for them.
So you were talking about the loneliness kind of epidemic amongst the aging population and, working with fertility all those years and then knowing that society as a whole in this country in particular, the value of that aging process is not, I guess it's not valued. Well, I don't know else to say that. Like
Yeah.
valuing life at the beginning, people want a baby, want a baby. There's so much surrounding that, so much emotion, so much treasuring, all of those kind of things. And then as we have this aging population, there seems to be such a disconnect. Do you see that or do you see that in your practice? I'm just so curious your perspective on that.
I see it in my life. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
you've heard this term, this situation yet, but many of we older ladies say we're invisible. Nobody pays attention to us anymore. And that's part of what happens to us as we are aging, as our identity changes.
Right.
Previously, we were important, in our workplace, let's say. Probably that's the main thing, is
Yeah.
transitioning out of the workplace. And now we're just another old lady. So that's a big part of it, is understanding that identity change that goes on. And yeah, it's hard to stay socially connected, but yeah. And I'm not sure why older people aren't valued in our
Yeah.
culture, because we actually have a lot of economic clout. We
Mm-hmm.
control, in fact, older women
Lot.
control the majority of the wealth in I think, well, in the US, and I don't know about other developed countries, because we tend to outlast our
Mhm.
spouses and inherit the wealth. So it's kind of contradictory, but we are
Right.
in a youth obsessed culture, and that's just what we're dealing with. So luckily, we now have at least Medicare to cover the general health needs of the population, and
Yeah.
that wasn't the case for a while. The most poverty-stricken demographic in the U.S. was older people, and now
Yeah.
that's not the case any longer. But
Which is
so at
good.
least that part is a little bit better,
Yeah.
and we'll see what happens with Social Security. But
Yeah. It'll be interesting. So when I was a young mom, so I'm 52 now, so it was a few years ago. I was always wanting a mentor. And I went and I told my pastor that I'm like, I needed help. I needed I'm like, what, how do I do these things? I mean, I had my mom and stuff, but sometimes you need a mentor that's not not your mom. And, when you're talking about your marriage and those kind of things. And I went to my pastor and he asked a few of the older ladies in the church, like 70 and older, and none of them wanted to be a mentor. They're like, we just don't have time for that. It's so interesting that you say, because I don't ever want to be that person. Like if somebody wants my help, I want to, as I age, I want to be that person. They're like, they just didn't have time for it. They were just busy with other things.
Hmm.
So it's interesting. You're in that season of life and you feel, the invisible woman. And I think there's women, even now I love the fact that I feel like women in their 70s or 80s like really want to talk to me now, which is kind of fun because I'm like, I want to learn because there's still so much to learn because, that age gap. Of course, you guys know more than we do. I guess I just like, how do you navigate that? Because there are so many young moms out there that would just really love somebody to kind of come alongside of them and help them. And I just didn't have that experience.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I regard the nuclear family as we currently experience it as being a great risk factor for our well-being. I think
Yeah,
it takes a village to
it
raise a
does.
child and to be a happy adult. You may have one child with whom you're very close and another child who needs their auntie or their uncle
Yeah,
or, their grandma because they're not quite the same, personality. But most of us, we meet somebody in school or grad school and move off to where, ever the jobs are or the postgraduate education is. And then we get a job there. And pretty
yeah,
soon we're 1,000 miles away from our nuclear family. And we don't have that kind of support. And I think that
yeah.
humans are not intrinsically designed to be nuclear. We're
Separated.
designed to be in a village, but
Yeah,
the data about how much time we spend alone and how few friends we have, how little social kind of casual social stuff that we do in our life is huge, and it's been going on for now generations. This is not
yeah,
brand new. Yeah. And things have changed so much that we know you just said the older ladies or older individuals know a lot more. Well, we know different things
you do.
came
Yeah.
to my mind, and I'm always like, "Oh gosh, I can't get my DVD player to work with my
Oh,
new computer," you know, call somebody under 40, and
right?
and they'll, "Oh yeah, sure, no problem. My phone won't do, I've lost this app, blah, 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 blah." So you guys know different things than
Yeah,
we
it's
do.
true.
But some of the social stuff we do know quite a lot about. And why do we have menopause in humans? There are a lot of species don't have menopause. They just keep
Yeah,
reproducing and then they
yeah.
die. But I'm not a philosopher or a sociologist, so I'm not going to answer that question exactly. But something to think about. Why
It is.
does menopause exist, and why do we spend a third of our lives in it?
Yeah,
And again, that harkens back to the ageism. It's like if we're going to spend a third of our life in menopause, it would be nice if we were training the docs and the nurses and et cetera to be aware of the physiology of the postmenopausal women and the
yes.
pathophysiology, the things that are wrong that can be addressed. So
Yeah.
that's my soapbox for today.
I
Yeah.
love it, Pat. This is great. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with? This has been a great conversation.
you know, you want to die young as late as possible is I forget whose quote that is exactly, maybe Peter Attia, that we're going to try to compress the time in our life that we are disabled and
Yeah.
immobile or mentally challenged cognitively or mood challenges, and enjoy our life as long as we possibly can.
Amen. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Pat. I really enjoyed this conversation. I love what you're
It's been
doing.
great.
Yes.
It's been
Oh,
really great. Yeah.
good.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you everyone for listening. And again, make sure you share this with somebody who needs to hear this, please. And I appreciate each and every one of you. I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to Take Back My Brain. If today's episode helped you connect with hope or direction, I want you to follow the show, leave us a review, and share it with someone who needs it. And if you're ready to start your own healing journey, explore our courses and our coaching programs at lauriehammer.com/store. So until next time, remember, you cannot medicate away a nutrient deficiency, and healing your brain isn't just possible, it's powerful.